Katherine Johnson. Focus question. What contributions to history has Katherine Johnson made? Eyes on the future. In early October 1957, people around the world looked up, hoping to catch a glimpse. They were searching for a pinpoint of light traveling rapidly across the star-dotted sky called Sputnik. It was the first satellite people had ever put into space. Few Americans were happy about the achievement, though. Sputnik had been launched into orbit by the Soviet Union. At the time, the Soviet Union was a great political and military rival of the United States. Many feared it meant the Soviets had taken the lead in rocket technology. Among the people looking up on those nights was a young Katherine Johnson, known as Katherine Goebel at the time. She was a research mathematician at NASA. NACA. NACA was the National Advisory Committee of Aeronautics. In 1958, it would be renamed the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. Catherine's job was to analyze the all-important numbers that guided the ideas, plans, and tests of aircraft designs. Katherine had already overcome many challenges to do the work she loved. She was a woman. She was also African American. At the time, few women were accepted to have a career, especially not one in science or mathematics. Black women faced even tougher challenges due to discrimination. They were often ignored or treated with scorn by the men, almost all white, who dominated engineering and the sciences. In the United States, however, was behind in the race to space. The country needed the best minds to create technology that had never been dreamed of before. Katherine Johnson had one of the best mathematical minds around. The Math Whiz. Katherine Johnson was born Katherine Coleman in 1918. Much of her youth was spent in the small town of White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. Her mother was a teacher, and their children that they were no better than anyone else, and no one was better than them. From an early age, Katherine loved learning, especially numbers. She counted everything: the steps she walked, the plates she washed, the books she read. By age 6, she was already in second grade. By age 10, she was already for high school. White Sulphur Springs did not offer equal schooling for black and white students. They were required to go to separate schools. The school for black students only went up to 8th grade. The Coleman family rented a home in Charlottetown, West Virginia, so their children could continue their education. Katherine completed high school at age 14. She then studied at West Virginia State College, an African American college. Katherine was so good at math that her professor designed an advanced course just for her. She graduated at age 18 with highest honors. The choice of careers for African American college graduates was limited, however. For black women, becoming a school teacher was one of the few options. That is what Katherine Coleman did. But she soon left teaching after falling in love and marrying James Goebel in 1939. The following year, though, West Virginia University contacted her. The president of the university personally invited her to enroll as one of only 3 African American graduate students. She left the mathematics program, however, after becoming pregnant. She and James would go on to have 3 daughters. She eventually returned to teaching. Jim Crow laws. In 1965, the government ended slavery in the United States following the Civil War. Virginia and other states passed Jim Crow laws, which enforced separation between white and black people. They were not allowed to attend the same schools, eat at the same restaurants, use the same bathrooms, or work at the same jobs. Black people were also prevented from voting. It was not until the 1950s and 1960s that the United States began to overturn these inequalities. Trajectories. In 1953, the global people was in Virginia for a wedding. Catherine's brother-in-law told her about a government job there. They needed mathematicians and were hiring black women. Catherine Glove started at NASA's Langley Research Center in 1953. She was part of a pool of computers. Today's computers were quite different from the computers of Catherine's time. Mathematicians like Catherine were called computers because they computed calculations using a pencil, paper, and simple calculators. At Langley, West Area Computing was actually a group of black and female math experts. They were responsible for doing the calculations for many NACA engineers. Before long, Catherine was assigned to a research team that studied aircraft design and flight. She was the only woman and the only African American in their group. Her expertise was in the area of analytical geometry. This type of geometry shows shapes and locations in terms of mathematical formulas. In the fields of engineering and flight, it allows designers to solve design problems using math. Catherine earned the respect of others on the team. She also gently but firmly insisted on being included in top-level meetings. More and more, her colleagues turned to her when the most important calculations were needed. In addition, Catherine refused to follow rules about racial segregation at Langley. She always insisted on being treated with dignity. Catherine used the same bathroom as white women. She refused to eat the colored area in the cafeteria. In 1956, Catherine's husband, James Gobble, died of brain cancer, leaving her to raise their three daughters by herself. She would marry James A. Johnson in 1959. A year later, the Soviets put Sputnik into orbit, igniting the space race. Catherine's career took off in a new direction towards space. The space race. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin orbited Earth. The same year, NASA blasted astronaut Alan Shepard Jr. into space as part of Project Mercury, which had the goal of putting an American astronaut in orbit. However, NASA had yet to achieve that. The United States will trailed the Soviet Union in the space race. Katherine Johnson's greatest strength was her ability to calculate the flight paths or trajectories or space vehicles. She would analyze a rocket's launching point and where the capsule was supposed to splash down. Then she would come up with the mathematical equations to show how to make the mission a success. She had to take into account the effects of gravity, weight, distance, and many other factors. The responsibility was huge. When an astronaut rocketed towards space, his or her life depended on NASA's experts. Johnson and her colleagues worked together to check, test, and confirm their calculations. In 1962, NASA was ready to put a person into orbit at last. John Glenn was chosen for the critical mission. He was one of the most capable, hard-working astronauts in Project Mercury. A new powerful electronic computer had been used to plan and control his flight around Earth. Glenn felt uneasy about depending on a machine, though. He wanted a human expert to check the calculations. He insisted on Katherine Johnson. Johnson crunched the numbers, rechecking all of her calculations for the mission. She informed the NASA team that the calculations checked out. They were ready for lunch. On February 20, 1962, John Glenn blasted out of Earth's atmosphere. He orbited the planet 3 times and splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean. Finally, it seemed that the U.S. space program had matched the Soviets. Soon, NASA's technology for piloted space travel would surpass theirs. Katherine Johnson's research continued to be instrumental to NASA's missions. Her calculations helped take astronauts to the moon in the late 1960s as part of the Apollo program. She figured out the trajectories for the mission. She calculated the meetings of the lunar lander and the space capsule that would carry the astronauts home again. Katherine was honored in an American flag that the crew had taken to the moon. Johnson later supported the space shuttle program by calculating shuttle trajectories. She retired from NASA in 1986. When asked about her job with the space program, she simply said how much she loved the work. Reaching for the stars. Katherine Johnson tackled a different mission after retirement. She traveled to schools to talk to young people about her career. She also wanted to share her enthusiasm for science and math. In 2015, she was invited to the White House at the age of 97. There, President Barack Obama presented her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the country's highest civilian honor. She spoke of her as a pioneer who broke the barriers of race and gender. He also honored her for showing that everyone can excel at math and science and research for the stars. In 2017, NASA honored her in yet another way. She opened the Katherine G. Johnson Computational Research Facility at Langley Research Center. Her abilities were once doubted because she was a black woman, and she is celebrated for her contributions to some of the country's largest scientific achievements.